Bobbie-Gene here from SlicedBread. Today I'm going to show you how to make a cedar wreath from start to finish. These are great. You can... Hi Milo. This is Milo, everybody. These are great. You can use them for macrame or dream catchers, or I like to make wreaths with solo wood flowers, and which is probably what I'll finish off these beauties with. So I've got a couple here. What you're going to need for the first part of the video to make these is some sharp trimmer nipper thingies, pruning shears I suppose would be what they're actually called. And that's really all what we're going to need for outside for the first two steps. And then after that, when we come back inside, we will need some paddle wire and some pliers. So let's get started. Step 1. Go outside with your nippers and find a cedar tree. Come on, let's go. So when making a cedar wreath, what we're going to look for is a small tapered branch that's going to be easily pliable that we can loop around. So I've found one here, and I'm going to just pull it down where I can reach to it, and anything that's wider than, say, your finger is going to probably be too thick to be able to bend. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it a cut. And there's step 1. So we'll gather a few more of these, and then we'll get to step 2. Cedar tree. So now that we've got our bounty, most wreaths I like to do 2 or 3 branches to fill it out, but it sort of depends on your own aesthetic and your own style, which you will develop over time as you start to make them. So on to our next step. We're going to head over to the burn pile and snip all of this extra greenery off, because there's no point in doing that in the house and just making a big mess. Come to the burn pile! So, in order to get these nice and smooth, what you're going to want to do is take each little branch and snip them at the base. Try to get it as flush as you can without gouging right into the bark. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. Snippy whippy all these guys off on this branch, and then I think with the magic of movie magic, they might just get all sped up and you can watch it on full blast. There's Milo. So just a tip. Not sure if you can see the bark. So the bark is quite smooth along initially, and then you'll see it starts to get like this crisscrossy, zigzaggy pattern where it's a little rougher and scratchier. I tend to go down where you can see it sort of starts to change color there. At this point, if you're doing a bark covered wreath, this is about where you're going to want to cut it off. Because anything like this, where this other color changes, as you bend it, chances are it's too soft of growth, and it will just snap anyway, which then you got to throw it out. So, and yeah, so this is a bit thick at the end. Ideally, you want it a little bit thinner and longer taper, but that's what we've got to work with in the area.
How wide is it?
It's about that wide. Which, I mean, I got meaty little fingers, so You can see with my meaty little fingers. It's about that big. You don't, depending on how bulky and big you want to make it, you want it to have flexibility, so it's bending this way, so I will continue the bend going that way. And you can kind of work the fibers a little bit. And you can kind of tell, I can tell by where I'm bending it, this part's really staying straight, but I think because it's got a bit of a shape to it, that'll work nicely in a wreath that's going to be about that diameter. So I'll do the rest of them, and then we'll go inside and make some wreaths. Something I've noticed and that I've learned is that if you put the blade part down into the crevice and you cut, you get a smoother bit, rather than if you have the blade on the bottom, you wind up with a little nub that you have to go back in and trim off. So if you can put your blade into the V, gives it a cleaner cut and saves you time once you're making your wreath. If you guys have any comments on how to do this so far, or have any questions, be sure to put them in the comments and we will write back and answer your questions as soon as we can. Like, subscribe, ring that bell. Milo likes to be with us everywhere we go, so this is Milo wearing his fancy Sherlock Holmes jacket. Milo. Come on, Milo. Let's head back to the house. Come on, let's go. Okay, we're back inside. We've got our cedar branches that we harvested from outside, and now I will show you how to form them into a wreath. So I usually start with the thickest one, and because it has a C shape like this, I'm going to wiggle it back and forth carefully and slowly, trying to make sure we don't add too much pressure and snap it. So I'm wiggling it back and forth a little bit on my leg to help to soften the fibers in the thicker area of it in order to get a nicer round shape. So now that I have it a little bit more flexible, I'm going to bring it around, and this, it's a little egg shape still, so I have to go back and soften this area. Whoop. You don't want to crack it. Alright, okay, so now again, we'll give it another try. See where we can make a pretty good circle. Seems like pretty good circle. You can always adjust the smoothness. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap it around itself, coming out and around, tucking under, just holding on to this end with this hand, bring it around, and back down to the end. So once you get it brought around, I'm just going to take this end here, take a little bit of paddle wire. It's better to have a little bit too much than not enough, because you can always trim it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the paddle wire, find the area where it's sort of the thinnest or where I want it to attach, put it over the top, and then I'm going to twist it around itself on the bottom. I don't know if you can see this or if I should stand up or anything. So I'm just twisting it in at the base till I get about 3 or 4 twists. And then I'm going to take my pliers and tighten it a bit more, because as it dries, the moisture comes out of the stem and then it loosens. So you want to tighten it until it's just starting to dig into the skin but not ripping into it. And then what I like to do is pull the tail ends back together. And then I'm just going to take the little nipper parts on the inside, snip those off just to where the twists start. And then I take that little pokey jabby piece and I turn it and I bend it into the inside, so nobody's going to get their finger caught or anything else is going to get caught on there. So generally lately what I've been doing is leaving this tail end until I add some more, because sometimes I like to adjust that part. So I'm going to take my next piece, find a little bit smaller, thinner piece. I really like these ones that have a little bit of a zigzag to them. I don't know if you can tell if I turn it. Where each branch came out, there's a little bit of a zigzag shape, which makes it really nice for wrapping. So we'll get them going both in the same direction. I've got my pointy end out, my pointy end out. I'm just going to rotate it around to about there. I'm just going until this part's quite thin, so I'm just going to add it in there. Whoop, on the outside. And this is the tricky part. So I'm going to gently add this through, and what I'm doing is I'm using my knee to slide it through. You don't want to just pull through, because that's how it snaps, and then you have to go find more tree branches, and that's frustrating, especially if you had to travel anywhere farther than your own backyard to go get them. So again, take the very tip, gently bend it around, pull it through, help support this end as I feed it through. And when you get to this area where it's folded before, give it a little bit of a extra squeeze through, bring it around. I like to keep mine wrapped quite tightly at the end. Again, same thing, just keep feeding it through. Now that it's at the thinner part, it's a little more flexible than the top. So again, just feeding it through, pinching it, keeping it a little bit tighter. There we go. And remember, it's a branch. They all have their own history and background and have been through all kinds of stuff just like us, and they have their weaker and stronger points. So again, wrapping it around. Whoop. Again. Looks like we might get, ooh, we're going to pass my base here. So I'm just, whoop. It's a little unruly. I'm just gonna try to push it through. It hurt a little bit of a crack, so I think I'm gonna have to go back and snip that off. Yep, nature. So, because I don't want a big flat spot in there, it might be okay for the project you're doing. You'd be able to just wire it here and then finish this off, and then maybe have all your treasures and excitement all along the bottom, and you wouldn't even notice this end. But because this ends up here, I think this is going to be my bottom half, so I don't really want a big straight chunk on the side. So I am going to go ahead and cut it off. But that's the nature of cedar wreaths. Sometimes that will happen. So again, I've got my ends here, and this is where leaving this end one out can be kind of fun, because you can twist them around each other a little bit and then bring them around, pop it through. Try not to pinch your little fingies. And I've got a bit of a gap there, so I'm just gonna see if I can tuck it in, and then I think we just wire this one. Let's have a look if I can get it in there. Come on, girl. It's a fine balance. And so when you're doing these wreaths, you're gonna want to gather the cedar and then make them within the next day or so. Unless you're keeping them outside where it's cool and wet and moist. Cedar tends to grow in a moist climate like we have here on the west coast of BC. So this is looking fairly round, I think. Somewhat. Okay, so now I'm just holding this in place with my thumb. Get some paddle wire. If you're making a lot of these, like I had to, got to make some for our wedding, for the bridesmaids and myself. So if you're doing lots of them, sometimes it's nice to have a whole bunch of these just like trimmed up and set to the side so that you don't have to take that moment to cut them. So again, I'm just putting it across the outside so the outside looks clean, taking it to the inside, crisscrossing. Pinch it really tight at the base. Do 3 or 4 turns. Then take your pliers just to tighten it. Give it a good pinch and a couple more turns till you feel it starting to just dig into the cedar bark a little bit. You don't want to go ahead and skin it, but keep it nice and tight on there, because as it loses moisture and dehydrates, that was easy for me to say, as it dehydrates and dries, the moisture will come out and the stems will get just a bit smaller. So these are going to loosen off, which generally doesn't matter too much once they've dried because they hold their shape quite well. But again, you don't want your ornament or your wreath or whatever coming apart on you or your customer. So again, here I'm just taking the end, giving it a pinch where the sharp end is, bending it down, popping it into the crevice so that it's nice and smooth. And so I've just got this one little end piece. Just gonna tuck it in, and I'm quite happy with that. If you want it to be really fastidious, you could go ahead and wire that too, but I'm quite happy with it. I'll just tuck these ends in. Now that my circle wreath is complete, I am happy with the shape. Remember, it's a natural thing. It's not going to be perfectly round. If you want to get close to perfectly round, or you need to make them all a specific size, what I recommend is getting a bucket and shaping them around the bucket, or even within the bucket, getting that actual first shape in there, getting it what you want, like the shape that you want. Let the first one dry. Then go back after a couple of days, take it out of the bucket, add your next ones around there, because the first one's already going to have its shape and it'll be easy to form the other ones all around. So on this side you can see that the end is cut up and flush and sort of follows the flow, but this original end doesn't. So I'm just going to finish it off, go ahead and cut that down just like that. Give it a little smoother finish, and I'm really happy with that one. Once your wreaths are all formed and your wire is securing them, take your little guys and give them a good rinse off. Wash off the extra nature.
Nature gets dirty.
These ones were pretty clean from where we harvested them from. there wasn't a lot of extra guck and stuff, but if you're harvesting them from an area that has maybe a road going by and it's dusty sometimes, maybe it's summertime, you're going to want to make sure you rinse them off, because anything that they touch after that will get dirty from the dirt transferring off. So be sure to rinse them off. If they're quite dirty, you can use just like a fluffy cloth and wipe them down, or if you want to use a gentle scrub brush and you feel like they're quite dirty, you could do that as well. But just be gentle, you don't want to rip at the skin of the bark. Yeah, then just pat them dry with a nice fluffy towel. You don't really need to rub it too much. Just a quick pat dry to get any of the surface stuff off that was left on there. And yeah, kind of reshape it if you need to. And, yeah. And then just hang them or set them somewhere where they're going to get good air circulation around them, and let them air dry for 1 to 2 weeks. You can cheat and go a little bit early, but remember the wreath forms are going to lose some of the moisture from the inside as they dry, and so they're going to shrink down a little bit, and you want to make sure that whatever you're making holds together well. So these beauties are going to take a few days to a week to dry. I would give them at least a week, depending on how warm your house is, before you're going to want to glue anything to them or wire anything on. You want to make sure that they're good and dry so that the stuff stays on, if you know what I'm saying. Thanks for joining us today and for supporting our page. If you like this video and would like to see more videos on how to maybe make something incredible like this out of your solar wreath, or maybe you want to make these up and make a Christmas wreath out of it, or you could have it this way and make some sort of a mobile for your baby's room or a wedding or whatever. For a wedding, I do recommend stripping the bark off of the branches first, and you get a light, beautiful color of wood. I can show you the one that I did for our wedding. This was my bouquet, if you can believe it. I had a pretty big fluffy dress too. So I was using silk flowers back then, and I really went crazy with it. But you can see the peeled bark gives it a nice light, soft color, but it takes way longer because you have to strip all of the bark off of the cedar while it's fresh. So you snip it, then you bring it in and you strip it, and then make it into your wreaths. So the possibilities are endless. It's only limited by your imagination. Again, thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button, share with your friends, and we will see you on the next project. If you'd like to see another video of where cedar trees live in the wild, please check out this video right here. It's a nature walk on the West Coast. JT and Milo and I go on an adventure and talk about some real nitty-gritty stuff. Go ahead, check it out. Might scare your parrot though, so probably do it outside. Or your dog.